Before the music, before the chains and the fame, 42 Dugg was surviving a world most people couldn't handle. Dice games, federal raids, getting carjacked as a kid. Even before the spotlight, life was a battlefield. And then came the loss that changed everything. This is the real story behind one of rap's most haunted voices. You see, back in the day, Detroit was the place to be. The city was thriving, factories were buzzing, Motown had folks dancing in the streets, and the vibe was unbeatable. You couldn't tell Detroit a thing. But when the 70s and 80s rolled around, things took a turn. Foreign cars started flooding in, and Detroit's pride, the auto industry, took a major hit. The decline was rough. Between 1950 and 2015, the city lost about 63% of its population. What was once a booming, crowded city turned into a ghost town in a lot of areas. And when jobs disappeared, the streets got cold. Detroit became known not just for its music and motors, but for its violent crime. In 2012 alone, the city clocked nearly 400 homicides, making it one of the most dangerous places in America. What made it even worse was that while the rest of the country was seeing violent crime go down, Detroit's numbers kept climbing. The FBI was showing that nationally, violent crime had dropped almost 13% since 2008 and over 12% since 2003. But in Detroit, it was a whole different story. Young people especially got caught in the crossfire. In 2010, the city lost 106 young souls to homicide. On top of that, police picked up 12,000 young people for all kinds of criminal charges. When they started digging into what was really fueling the mess, gangs kept popping up at the center. It wasn't a surprise, though. Detroit had a long history with street organizations. Real heavy names like the Purple Gang from back in the Prohibition days and Young Boys Incorporated, or YBI, running the streets in the 80s with the cocaine trade. Today, that tradition hasn't exactly died. A few corporate-style gangs still make noise in the drug world, enough to stay on the Fed's radar. But if you ask the experts, those flashy, organized gangs are the exception, not the rule. Most of Detroit's street crews are small, neighborhood-based cliques, nothing like the big franchise-style gangs you see out in Chicago or Los Angeles. Detroit gangs move different. They're more about who you grew up with, who's from your block, and less about big national alliances. One of those hometown crews is the Hustle Boys. And out of that environment came a name that made it beyond just the neighborhood, 42 Dugg. Which brings the story to Dion Hayes, the 30-year-old rapper most people know today as 42 Dugg. 42 Dugg, born Dion Hayes, came up in one of the rougher corners of East Detroit, but if you ask him, his childhood wasn't all doom and gloom like people might expect. He'll tell you it was cool, skating, partying, just being young and having fun. Still, Detroit wasn't exactly the easiest place to grow up. The city had declared bankruptcy in 2013, going without a mayor for a stretch, and in parts of Michigan, especially in black communities, still didn't even have access to clean water. So, while Dugg might have been having fun, the streets around him were anything but sweet. Eventually, he got pulled into the Hustle Boys, a street crew tied to the Crips on the east side. At first, they were just trying to make money by throwing parties. But once they started shining, other gangs started to feel some type of way. That pressure pushed the Hustle Boys into darker territory, shootings, robberies, drug deals, all of that. They set up shop in a spot they called the Hustle House, which was just one of the members' homes where they'd plot out their moves, bag up drugs, and get ready to hit the road. Their game was simple: stack up on guns or prescription pills in Michigan, then take them out of state to places like Southern Ohio and West Virginia, and flip them for profit. Women in the crew even played a part by acting as mules, hiding pills inside themselves during the trips. All of that eventually caught up with them. In 2011, the feds came knocking and hit the Hustle Boys with indictments for trafficking. One of the names that kept popping up in Dugg's music after that was Ski. That wasn't just a random shout out. Ski was Jaron Gaskin, one of the original Hustle Boys. Back in August 2010, around 8:30 at night, Gaskin was on one of those out-of-town runs. He was in a car with Pinky Lewis behind the wheel and two others, Vonda Hopkins and DeMarco Hodge, riding along. They were driving through Ohio when a state trooper spotted them riding with no headlights. Even though they flicked them on just before he pulled them over, it was too late. Another trooper showed up with a drug-sniffing dog, and sure enough, the dog caught the scent. Things fell apart quickly after that. Hopkins, sitting up front, gave the cops a fake ID and admitted she'd been smoking weed. When the troopers searched her, she found something stuffed in her groin. Before even getting cuffed, Hopkins confessed. She was carrying 300 to 400 pills inside her. Meanwhile, Pinky tried to sneak a condom full of pills out from her own body and stash it in the back seat of the police car. They ended up finding 602 OxyContin pills on Hopkins. Turns out, someone with the online name Pinky 437 had been pushing the same kind of pills too. 6 months later, Gaskin got picked up and was caught with 35 oxymorphone pills. He tried to get the evidence tossed out, saying the stop wasn't legit, but the court wasn't trying to hear that. He got hit with a conspiracy charge and 2 counts of possession. The result, a 30-year sentence plus 3 years of supervised release. And just like that, one of the key pieces in Dugg's early world was taken off the board. Growing up, Dugg was always knee-deep in something wild. Trouble wasn't just around the corner, it was riding shotgun. His first case hit when he was just 12, and it wasn't just any petty mess. He stole a car that had already been stolen, one the police had their eyes locked on. That right there set the tone early. Back then, people knew him as Dougie, and if you were from his side of the city, you knew not to bet against him at the dice game. Word is, at just 12 years old, he'd already stacked over $12,000 from the corner games. That kind of money, at that age, it tells you exactly what kind of path he was carving out for himself. By the time he hit 14, Dugg dipped out and ran away from home. But that freedom didn't last long. He got caught with a strap and landed on probation around 2008. But even with the law watching him, he stayed tied to the streets. Just a year later, at 15, he was still active while the 42 boys, his crew, kept running the block, stacking paper and beefing with other sets across Detroit. Back in Detroit, things between the 7 Mile Bloods and rival East Side gangs were on fire. The Hustle Boys, Gutter Boys, and 6 Mile Cheddar Grove all had problems with each other, and tensions were boiling over. Then came the summer of 2014. Out of nowhere, rival members crossed paths at the Lawton Parole Office on the west side. A regular check-in turned into a spark that lit everything up. On July 14, 2014, 23-year-old twins Michael and Martaz Davis showed up for their morning parole meeting. Both had been hit with the same armed robbery charge and wrapped together under the name 42 Twins. They'd been posting music and doing shows, but off stage, they were tied to the Hustle Boys, one of the Blood's main enemies. That same morning, another parolee showed up, Billy Arnold, a name that carried weight in the 7 Mile Bloods. Prosecutors say when Arnold saw the twins, he wasted no time. He called up some of his people, including Corey Bailey, better known in the streets as Cocaine Sonny. The plan was simple: link up and catch their rivals slipping. Meanwhile, the twins left the parole office with 2 more Hustle Boys, including Dwan Neff Page. They pulled off, not knowing 3 cars full of 7 Mile Bloods were on their tail. They didn't get far. Once they hit Grand River and Oakman, a white Chrysler Sebring pulled up alongside them. That's when the ambush went down. Arnold and Bailey leaned out and opened fire. Michael Davis took a bullet to the chest. Page got lit up. Shots to the face and upper body. It was brutal. Right after the shots rang out, Page's people spotted a social worker named Silhouette O'Neill driving back to work from lunch. They flagged her down, begging for help. At first, she couldn't even look at him. When she finally did, the scene was so graphic she screamed. She later testified that Page's eye was hanging out of the socket. Page was somehow still breathing, but barely. He stayed in a coma for weeks, and in the end, he didn't survive. He was just 22. Later on, after the smoke cleared, Arnold talked about the shooting with a man named Derek Kennedy. Kennedy would eventually admit to being in on the racketeering game, and take the stand. He told the feds that Arnold bragged about the hit, saying straight up that he shot them and cooked them. When the trial kicked off in January, the feds said they had a key witness, Michael Davis, the surviving twin. They told the jury Davis was going to name names, point fingers at Arnold and Bailey, and lay it all out. He had already testified twice in secret to a grand jury. But when it came time to deliver in court, Davis didn't show. The prosecutors had made a promise they just couldn't keep. However, that same year, 42 Dugg found himself on the wrong side of the law, caught up in a carjacking with a gun on him. Just like that, 4 years in prison. This wasn't some hardened street dude either. Dugg used to be into skating, hanging out, and doing regular teenage stuff, but prison changed all that. Not long after he got into a fight with another inmate, and boom, 2 more years added to his bid. That brought it to 6 years behind bars. Things got even rougher when he landed in solitary confinement, twice. The first time in the hole, it broke him down in a different way. Locked in for 23 hours a day, no real human contact, just silence and walls. It messed with his body and his head. He barely ate, sometimes just breakfast, maybe a cookie here or there. He'd come out looking like a skeleton, barely hitting 110 pounds. The food was trash, and the COs didn't make it any better. One officer in particular stayed on his neck, even taking his extra pair of pants just to be petty. But Dugg wasn't completely alone in that darkness. He had his boy Lou, who held him down. And at one point, even his brother ended up in solitary with him. That's when things started to shift. Sitting in that cold, quiet cell, he started to teach himself how to rap. Basketball gave him a mental escape. He became a big Kentucky fan. But it was the bars that really kept him grounded. He grew up listening to Jeezy and Boozy, but never saw himself rapping for real. His brother pushed him to try, and the second time he ended up in solitary, he got serious about it. All those days of isolation turned into verses. He wrote about the fights, the boredom, the time he lost that was supposed to be his youth. By the time he got out at 22, he had notebooks full of pain, rhymes like journal entries just waiting to be heard. Not long after his release, he dropped a track called The Streets on his debut mixtape, Young and Turnt, in 2019. The song featured fellow Detroit native Babyface Ray and included a tribute to his fallen friend Eastside Snoop, who was gunned down while sitting in his car on Flanders Street. The track hit hard, especially the part where he talks about losing Snoop and imagining him balling in heaven. Now here's where life did a little twist. While playing a dice game in Atlanta, he ended up crossing paths with Lil Baby. At first, it was just about the gamble, no real conversation, just money on the floor. But a year later, Dugg caught a flight back to Atlanta to link with Baby and his team for real. Both of them shared that same love for gambling, and that's what really bonded them. Lil Baby later said he'd never met another young dude who loved to gamble the way Dugg did. That respect turned into a real connection. Soon after, Yo Gotti heard about Dugg through Baby and wanted in. Fast forward to March, Dugg's back in Detroit, and during Meek Mill's Motivation Tour, Gotti stepped on stage and handed him a CMG chain. That moment made it official. Dugg was signed to CMG in partnership with Lil Baby's 4PF. People really started paying attention to 42 Dugg in 2018. That's when he dropped The Streets with Babyface Ray and STFU, a raw, no-holds-barred track featuring Peasy, EWM, Kato, Bag Boy Mel, Cash Kid, and Yoon Buck. That mix of gritty street stories and Midwest flavor had people turning their heads. Fast forward to November 2019. This is when things started to heat up with the law. ATF agents got tipped off that Hayes had fired a gun at Stoddard's Range and Guns in Atlanta. Problem was, he had a felony on his record, so even touching a gun was a federal offense. The feds pulled the security footage and the range's paperwork, and clear as day, there was Hayes on video holding, loading, and firing a 9mm Glock. By March 2020, the law caught up to him. He got arrested and charged for having that gun illegally. But even with the federal case on his back, Hayes wasn't laying low. Instead, he moved into the suburbs and dropped a cool $1.4 million on a 500 square foot crib outside of Atlanta. That move showed he was trying to elevate, but also living risky. Later that year in November, he was sentenced to 3 years probation and hit with a $90,000 fine. Now, anybody from the hood knows probation ain't nothing to play with. One wrong move and you back behind bars. Just ask 42 Dugg. He was on probation too and kept failing drug tests, then got arrested out in Vegas for interfering with police. That judge didn't hesitate, sent him straight to a federal prison camp for 6 months. Dugg tried to appeal it, thinking that meant he could chill for a bit. But nah, he was still supposed to report to the camp while waiting on that hearing. He didn't, and his lawyers had to break it to him. Missing that check-in was another crime. The pandemic era was rough on up-and-coming rappers. Songs that would have lit up the club just didn't hit the same. But Lil Baby, he was on a whole different level. My Turn held the #1 spot for 5 weeks straight and eventually went triple platinum. He brought Dugg along for the ride too. On Grace, they painted a grim picture of life before rap. Dark, raw, and full of pain. Dugg made sure people knew he wasn't just flexing now. He'd been through something. When he rapped about almost losing a building, Not just a house, it hit different. Then came their second link up in May 2020, We Paid. That track didn't just pop, it exploded. From Dugg's signature whistle to the beat drop, it was a celebration of getting out of the mud. Dugg brought the hunger, Baby brought the finesse. It was street to sweet energy, and it helped Dugg level up. He credited both Baby and Yo Gotti for keeping him focused and pushing him to grind harder. By February 2021, things got shaky again. Reports came out about a shooting at a video shoot with Dugg and Roddy Ricch. 3 people got hit. The internet ran wild with rumors that Dugg or Ricch might have been among the injured. Fans were panicked, but the Atlanta police shut that down quick. Neither rapper was hurt. The victims were Antoine Blake and Vernon Mulder, both sent to the hospital in stable condition. A third guy, Peter Cook, caught a piece of flying debris, not a bullet like people first thought. To calm everybody down, Dugg went live on IG with Lil Baby, clearing the air. He told people to stop running with fake news, saying they weren't anywhere near the shooting. He looked calm, grateful, and made sure fans knew he was good. Meanwhile, a friend of Roddy's hit Twitter confirming he was straight too. Then May 2021 rolled around and Hayes was riding a wave. Billboard named him their R&B/hip-hop Rookie of the Month. That same week, he dropped Free Dem Boys, a 19-track mixtape dedicated to all his locked-up homies. One of the standout joints was 4DA Gang, a raw collab with Roddy Ricch. Later that year, XXL gave him the stamp, putting him in their freshman class of 2021, a major cosign for any artist trying to break into the mainstream. But just when things were looking up, Dugg made a wild move. In April 2022, 42 Dugg found himself in the middle of a real-life manhunt that sounded like it came straight out of a movie. He was supposed to report to a federal prison camp in West Virginia to start a 6-month sentence for having a gun, but instead he vanished. Word is, Dugg started telling people he was a sovereign citizen, meaning he thought he was above federal law. Prosecutors even said he claimed to be worth $11 million and had people helping him stay low while agents searched across state lines to track him down. While he was on the run, Dugg was still flexing heavily on social media, posting for over 2 million followers like everything was sweet. His lawyer even told the court that Dugg wasn't hiding, saying he was out in public, living regular, but the feds weren't buying it. ATF agents tried pinging his phone and keeping watch on several addresses around Detroit, but none of them led to him. Eventually, a signal popped up in Memphis. They kept eyes on him as he boarded a private jet and flew into Willow Run Airport just outside Detroit. Here's where it gets wild. The jet didn't even have a flight number, and his name wasn't listed on the passenger list. Still, when the plane landed around 4:45 in the morning, airport security spotted him. He tried to blend in, but his phone got laid out on a table, and that's what led agents right to him. Turns out, he had just flown in from Memphis after catching an NBA playoff game between the Grizzlies and the Warriors. His bodyguard, who was waiting in the parking lot, had 2 Glocks with extended mags that could hold 30 rounds each. When they arrested Dugg, he had $25,000 in cash and over $100,000 worth of jewelry on him. Then came the phone drama. The ATF went to collect his phone from airport security, but it was gone. According to the prosecutor, the pilot had slipped it into his pocket like he was trying to hide it. Agents got it back, but by then, they had even more questions. The prosecutor made it clear Dugg had serious resources and real help, including a private pilot willing to fly without paperwork and sneak his name off manifests. That's not something regular people can pull off. While locked up, investigators tapped into Dugg's jail calls. He reportedly stayed away from Atlanta because of some beef, and his team was worried he might go through withdrawal. Records showed he tested positive for codeine and morphine not long before. Despite all this, Dugg was represented by a court-appointed lawyer, not some high-powered attorney. That surprised people, especially after prosecutors kept pointing out his wealth and access to jets. Eventually, Dugg was ordered to stay locked up until he could be sent to Georgia to deal with a fresh criminal charge, basically for not showing up when he was supposed to. His camp tried to argue that he wasn't dodging time on purpose. They said he had filed an appeal to fight his probation revocation and believed he didn't need to report to prison yet. But regardless of the reason, the timing couldn't have been worse. Dugg was 28, in the middle of a hot run, and now in deeper legal trouble. When asked if they contacted his family to find out where he was hiding, an ATF agent responded that they did, but hinted at more criminal activity they were also investigating, choosing not to say too much in open court. Fast forward to April 2023, and Dugg ended up getting hit with a full year in prison for failing to report, still tied to that old 2020 gun case. He was also slapped with 3 years of supervised release, a $20,000 fine, and banned from using any drugs. While inside, he posted to social media, painting a picture of just how rough prison life was. He said the place was so bad, he had to heat up food using hot shower water because there were no microwaves, no visits, no hot food, just cold, hard time. Even Yo Gotti tried to step in. In May, he put out a public offer, $2 million to any lawyer who could get Dugg out early, called it his birthday wish. Meanwhile, Dugg kept venting online about prison raids and being treated unfairly, saying he was locked up over drug tests, a probation issue, and going to a gun range, not for hurting anybody. He questioned if he really deserved to rot behind bars for that. After spending about 18 months locked up, Dugg was finally released from the U.S. Penitentiary in Atlanta on October 16, 2023. Right when 42 Dugg touched down, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. He came home just as CMG was gearing up for their heavily hyped tour, and we're talking a lineup stacked with heavyweights like Moneybagg Yo, Glorilla, ESTG, and a few more hitters. The news of the tour hit the streets right after Dugg's release, and fans lit up. It felt like the stars aligned, and the buzz was real. After getting back, Dugg started dropping a few loose tracks throughout the fall and winter. Then he made it official. His debut album, Forever Us, Never Them, was locked in for a July 4th release. People already had an idea of what to expect. If you've been following his mixtapes, you know his formula. Hard-hitting, high-energy trap bangers with a little emotional depth mixed in. People were hoping for something along the lines of For the Gang or that explosive verse he did on Tyler, the Creator's Lemonhead. At the same time, fans expected some of that real personal pain too, like Free Mary or his verse on Ron Artest. And when the album dropped, it mostly stuck to what people already expected, for better or worse. But what really brought it to life were the features. Almost everybody showed up and did their thing, except Rilo Rodriguez, who sounded like he just mailed it in. Everybody else? They matched Dugg's energy and sometimes even pushed him to go harder. Whether it was trading war stories with ESTG on Since When or turning up with Sexy Red on NPO, the collabs kept it fresh and unpredictable. Those moments proved that when Dugg gets pushed, he leaves his comfort zone and actually brings something new to the table. When you look at where Dugg was just a few years ago compared to now, not much might seem different at first glance. But according to him, there's a shift. He's taking his time now, thinking before he moves, and treating the music like it means something. He's calm about it too, letting life do what it does. In his own words, he's just out here living, praying, and waiting to see if he hits the mega million. What are your thoughts on this story? Appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.